A few weeks ago, when I was starting out this podcast, I saw a couple of stories on Instagram from podcasters that I really look up to and saw that they had just announced their live shows. They were going on tour, and instantly my stomach sort of just clinched and I got the feeling of, why am I not there yet? Sound familiar? So whether it's through social media stories or highlights, maybe it's a family member's success, or just someone in the gym who you perceive to be way fitter than you, we all compare ourselves to others at some point. But the key question is, can comparison ever be a good thing, or does it always have to leave us feeling worse? And today on Decoding Wisdom, we're going to be talking about the comparison conundrum. Why do we do it? When does it help us? When can it hurt us? And how do we keep ourselves grounded in our own journey? Welcome back to Decoding Wisdom, guys. I'm your host, Sachin Jha, where we blend timeless philosophies with modern insights to help both me and you live a high-performing and meaningful life. And we're going to be exploring the psychology behind why we compare ourselves to others. And trust me, it's not just social media. We'll talk about the bright side of comparison. And yes, there is one. And the darker side, obviously, that can sort of tank our self-esteem if we're not careful with it. So stick around, because by the end of this episode, you'll have a fresh perspective on comparison, plus some practical tools to stop letting it run the show for you. But firstly, let's talk about why comparison even happens. And there's a very famous psychologist by the name of Daniel Kahneman. You might know him from his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he explains that our brains have these built-in shortcuts called cognitive biases that help us figure out where we stand in a group. And historically speaking, comparing ourselves was useful for primarily survival, right? We needed to know who was the strongest or the best at hunting. But fast forward to today, 2025, and that same instinct now runs on overdrive, thanks to social media and the 24/7 connectivity that we have these days. So it's not that social media has created comparison. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's just that it's amplified it. I'm talking about it going from 10x to 100x over a span of a decade, maybe a couple of decades, but there or thereabouts. And suddenly we're seeing everyone's perfect story or highlight read about their perfect vacations, dream jobs, rock solid relationships. And then we start feeling that we're falling behind, wondering if we've missed some kind of boat. But here's a twist though. Comparison isn't always a bad thing, and it shouldn't be. Sometimes it actually helps us light a fire under us and pushes us to level up. Think about it from an inspiration standpoint. Watching someone crush a half marathon time can inspire you to actually start training for a 10K, maybe a half marathon, maybe a full marathon, who knows? Or seeing a friend launch a business might actually motivate you to finally act on your own idea that you may have been cooking up in your head. But then there's also this concept of learning. If you treat someone else's success as a case study rather than a threat, and ask yourself, what can I learn from their journey? It can actually help you grow. But then there's also this angle of healthy competition. Think about sports. A bit of rivalry can really bring out your best performance. It did for me through cricket, and that's why I play a lot of sports right now. But just make sure that it actually stays friendly and not toxic. Do you know what I mean? So for me, when I see a podcaster that I really admire hitting big milestones, such as live shows, I remind myself, okay, what can I learn from their consistency and style? What are they doing right? And how can I adapt it to my podcast or my space? That right there is positive comparison. But we can't ignore the dark side as well. And we all know the famous quote from Theodore Roosevelt, which is, comparison is the thief of joy. And boy, was he onto something, wasn't he? Because a lot of times we envy people, we envy others. And constantly seeing others' success can make us feel inadequate at times, anxious, or even depressed. And there's research by another great psychologist by the name of Jean Twenge showing a correlation between heavy social media use and increased feelings of depression, especially among teens. And this is very common knowledge these days. But we also set unrealistic expectations for us, or standards. So Instagram and social media is not real life. We need to know that. We compare our behind the scenes to someone else's stories or highlight reels, and it's never a fair fight. It also even causes paralysis, not literal paralysis, but have you ever been so intimidated by how fast someone else has gone ahead of you that you didn't even start? Yeah, that right there is destructive power of comparison. And I felt this firsthand. A while back, I couldn't help but compare my career trajectory to that of a couple of university friends. And I remember thinking, whoa, like I'm so far behind. I'll never catch up. And that fear almost stopped me from even trying new things. Well, almost. Well, there's a podcast now, so that's good. So, how do we actually walk the line between healthy comparison and self-destruction? Here are some strategies that I've personally used. Only 3, again, short and sweet, that hopefully helps you as well. The first one is focus within your own lane and practice within your own lane. What do I mean by that? You need to remind yourself, I'm only seeing part of someone else's story. You don't know the full picture. But a part of staying in your own lane is set personal goals that reflect your values, not just what looks good on social media. So for me, for example, journaling about what I did each day helps me shift the focus from others to my own growth. The second one is use comparison as a tool, not a measuring stick. So if you see someone succeeding, ask yourself, what can I learn? Or how can this motivate me? Instead of, why am I not there yet? With the live shows that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to quote Marcus Aurelius again. I know I quoted him a couple of episodes ago, but he just keeps coming up with bangers. So here's another one. But he says, it never ceases to amaze me that we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions rather than our own. So it's a nice little reminder to value your own progress. And if you fast forward, how long is it now? Nearly 2 millennia, I guess? And President Theodore Roosevelt echoed the very same wisdom with his words, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. So you see the correlation there. It's a universal truth. All the way from ancient Rome to the modern White House. We've been wrestling with how to keep comparisons from derailing our own happiness. And the third strategy that I use is just do a detox. I call it the comparison detox. Maybe it's a social media detox for you. But every so often, cut back on social media or mute accounts that make you feel terrible. Engage instead in activities that have zero external yardstick. So think about like painting, journaling, or volunteering. For me, it's been video games. I like video games. It's sports. I love playing sports. Or even music. I love playing the guitar. So this is to reconnect with your internal sense of joy. That's the key right there. All right. So here's a little challenge for you then. I want you to pick one person on social media that you constantly compare yourself to. Maybe it's a friend, an influencer, or maybe it's even a coworker. Write down 3 things that you admire about them and that you'd like to learn from. It could be their discipline, their creativity, or their sense of style. And potentially unfollow and mute them if their content actually sparks envy rather than inspiration. So I'd love to hear about how this goes for you. So send me a DM on Instagram or comment on this episode if this small shift actually changes how you feel day to day. So let's bring it home. So when it comes to comparison, remember, it's neither all good nor all bad. It can push you to become better, or it can even paralyze you. The key is choosing how you wield it. We are wired to compare, and that's part of being a human. But with little awareness and few practical steps, you can actually flip comparison into a catalyst instead of a cage. So with that, thanks for tuning into Decoding Wisdom. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend who might need a little reminder that they're just enough. They're enough as they are. And as always, stay curious, keep growing, and I'll catch you next time. And next week's episode is actually going to be very interesting. We might actually have our first guest on the show. So it's in the works. I hope you guys are excited for it as much as I am. And until then, have a good one. Cheers.